September 6, 2022, 6:14 a.m., Kharkiv Oblast, northeastern Ukraine. Ukrainian forces launch offensive, multiple axes, simultaneously. No warning, no build-up visible to Russian intelligence, just sudden overwhelming assault across a 100-kilometer front. Russian forces are surprised, completely. Defensive positions on demand. Command confused. Communications disrupted. Within hours, Ukrainian spearheads have penetrated 15 kilometers. Within 24 hours, 30 kilometers. Within 72 hours, 50 kilometers. Entire Russian defensive system in northeast Ukraine is collapsing. Not retreating orderly. Collapsing. Units fleeing, abandoning equipment, leaving wounded. This is rout. This is what total collapse looks like. The offensive continues. Ukrainian forces advance faster than Russian command can respond, faster than reinforcements can arrive, faster than orderly withdrawal can organize. Speed is weapon. Momentum is unstoppable. Russian units try to establish new defensive lines. Ukrainians bypass them, encircle them, force surrender or rout. No time to dig in, no time to prepare, just constant pressure. Relentless advance. Russian front doesn't bend, shatters completely. At 11:47 p.m. September 9th, 89 hours after offensive began, Ukrainian forces control 3,000 square kilometers, liberated dozens of towns, reached Russian border in places, captured hundreds of prisoners, seized massive amounts of equipment. Russian forces have retreated 50-plus kilometers, abandoned Izium, abandoned Kupiansk, abandoned entire Kharkiv Oblast positions. This is largest Ukrainian victory of war. This is what happens when attacking force achieves complete operational surprise against enemy who can respond fast enough. This is Kharkiv offensive. 3 days that changed war. This is Iron Bullet. And what happened at Kharkiv wasn't just tactical success. Was operational catastrophe for Russia, where months of Russian defensive preparations meant nothing because defenders were too thin, too poorly led, too slow to respond, where Ukrainian operational security achieved perfect surprise, where Russian command paralysis turned tactical breakthrough into strategic collapse. The question isn't whether Ukrainians won decisively. Territory proves it. Question is how. How did Ukraine achieve surprise this complete? Why did Russian defenses collapse so totally? And what this reveals about Russian military's systemic failures that enabled 50-kilometer breakthrough in 72 hours. Official Ukrainian statements during offensive deliberately vague. Offensive operations in several directions, no specifics, no claims of major gains. Operational security maintained even during success. Only after breakthrough consolidated did Ukraine acknowledge scale, significant territorial gains. Understatement. 3,000 square kilometers isn't significant. It's decisive. Ukrainian information discipline was perfect. Russians didn't know what hit them until too late. Russian statements panic poorly disguised as planning. First day, minor Ukrainian probing attacks. Day 2, regrouping to more favorable positions. Translation running away. Day 3, strategic withdrawal to shorten front lines. Translation front collapsed. Can't hold. Retreating 50 kilometers. These euphemisms fooled nobody. Satellite imagery showed abandoned equipment. Drone footage showed fleeing columns. Reality was total collapse. Statements were damage control. Failed damage control. Stay with me. Because the detail that explains Kharkiv collapse, why 50 kilometers fell in 3 days, is going to show you that operational surprise is decisive when exploited with speed. That Russian defenses were thin because forces were committed elsewhere. that Russian command couldn't respond fast enough to Ukrainian tempo. That once breakthrough occurred, Russian units panicked. Psychological collapse created military collapse. All advantages compounded. Ukrainian planning was excellent. Execution was better. Russian response was catastrophic. 3 days proved that warfare's oldest principle still applies. Surprise and speed defeat mass and position when attacker plans well and defender fails completely. Let's establish what Kharkiv offensive actually was. Planning, execution. Results: Kharkiv Oblast, northeast Ukraine. Russian occupied since February. Defensive lines established. Multiple layers. Should be strong, weren't, because Russian forces were overstretched. Committed heavily to Donbass offensive. Kherson defensive. Not enough troops to defend everywhere strongly. Kharkiv was economy of force sector. Minimal troops. Assumed Ukrainians wouldn't attack. Assumption was catastrophically wrong. Ukrainian planning. Months of preparation. Troop concentrations hidden. Movements at night. Deception operations suggesting offensive would be in south near Kherson. Russian intelligence focused there. Reinforced there. Weakened Kharkiv sector. Perfect Ukrainian deception. When offensive launched in northeast, Russians were surprised completely. Wrong place, wrong time, wrong force disposition. Everything favored Ukraine. All because Ukrainian operational security was perfect and Russian intelligence failed completely. September 6th, day 1. The breakthrough, 6:14 a.m. Ukrainian forces attack, multiple axes. Balaklia direction, Shevchenkovo direction, Kupiansk direction. Simultaneous, coordinated. Combined arms, armor, infantry, artillery. Everything synchronized. Initial Russian positions overrun quickly. Defenders surprised. Outnumbered at point of attack. Overwhelmed. First defensive line penetrated by 9 a.m. 3 hours. Ukrainian forces don't stop. Continue advancing. This is critical. Momentum maintained. No pauses. No consolidation. Just relentless pressure forward. 12:00 p.m. Ukrainian spearheads 15 kilometers beyond start line. Russian command realizes situation is serious. Orders reinforcements, but reinforcements are far away. Committed elsewhere. Will take days to arrive. Ukrainian advance will be 50 kilometers away by then. Now orders are issued. Reality makes them irrelevant. Ukrainian tempo has exceeded Russian response capability. This gap will determine everything. 6 p.m. Balaklia surrounded. Russians inside trapped. Some fight, most surrender. Town falls. Ukrainian forces continue advancing. No pause to consolidate victory. Just exploit. Keep moving. Russian units attempting to form defensive lines find Ukrainians already past them. Positions become irrelevant immediately. Russians retreat. Again, pattern is established. Ukrainian advance. Russian retreat. Repeat. This pattern will continue for 3 days. September 7th, day 2. Exploitation. Morning. Ukrainian forces advancing on multiple axes. Kupiansk threatened. Izium threatened. Russian command is panicking. Not panicking like stressed commanders making hard decisions. Panicking like organization losing control. Communications breaking down. Units retreating without orders. Commanders abandoning positions. Chain of command fragmenting. This is what collapse looks like from inside. Afternoon, Kupiansk falls. Critical logistics hub. Railway junction. Russian supply lines through Kupiansk are cut. Forces further south at Izium are now isolated. Can be supplied only by bad roads. Under Ukrainian artillery fire. Under drone surveillance. Izium garrison is trapped. must retreat or be encircled. The Ukrainian forces pursue. Harassment, artillery, drones. Retreat becomes rout. Evening. Ukrainian forces 35 kilometers beyond start line. In 36 hours, Russian defenses haven't slowed advance, haven't stopped advance, just collapsed sequentially. Each position falls. Next position retreats. Before Ukrainians arrive. Psychological domino effect. Panic spreading. Units that haven't been attacked retreat because neighbors did. Self-fulfilling prophecy of collapse. September 9th. Day 3. Consolidation and pursuit. Morning. Izium abandoned. Major Russian garrison. Logistics hub. Fortified since April. All abandoned overnight. Ukrainian forces enter. Find massive amounts of abandoned equipment. Ammunition. Supplies. Russians fled so fast they left everything. This is an orderly retreat. This is rout. Panic-driven flight. Ukrainian forces secure Izium. Continue advancing eastward. Afternoon. Ukrainian forces reach Russian border in some sectors. 50 kilometers from start line. 3 days. Russian front in northeast has collapsed completely. Thousands of square kilometers liberated. Strategic implications are immense. Russian logistics through Kupiansk are cut. Forces in Donbass are threatened from north. Entire Russian operational position in eastern Ukraine is compromised. Evening. Offensive operations slow. Not because Russians stopped Ukrainians. Because Ukrainian logistics can't keep up with advance. Units outrunning supply lines. Prepare for Russian counterattack that will come. 3 days changed everything. 3,000 square kilometers. Dozens of towns. Hundreds of prisoners. Massive equipment losses for Russia. Decisive Ukrainian victory. Now the analysis. How this happened. What it means. Operational surprise. Ukrainian deception was perfect. Convinced Russians' offensive would be in south. Russian intelligence failed completely. Didn't detect Ukrainian buildup in northeast. Didn't predict offensive timing. Didn't warn defenders. This intelligence failure enabled Ukrainian surprise. Surprise enabled breakthrough. Breakthrough enabled exploitation. All cascaded from perfect Ukrainian operational security and catastrophic Russian intelligence failure. Russian overextension. Russian forces were committed in Donbass. Kherson couldn't defend everywhere strongly. Kharkiv sector was weak. Economy of force. Minimal troops. When Ukrainians attacked with strength against weakness, mathematics favored Ukraine overwhelmingly. Local superiority was decisive. Russians couldn't reinforce fast enough, couldn't stop breakthrough, couldn't prevent exploitation. Overextension created vulnerability. Ukraine exploited perfectly. Command paralysis. Russian command couldn't respond effectively. Decision-making was too slow. Ukrainian tempo exceeded Russian Uday loop. By the time Russians decided what to do, the situation had changed. Made decisions obsolete. Orders arrived to defend positions already lost. Reinforcements arrived to front lines that had moved. Everything Russian command tried was too slow. This paralysis turned breakthrough into collapse. Psychological collapse. Once breakthrough occurred, Russian units panicked, saw neighbors retreated themselves. Positive feedback loop. Panic spread faster than Ukrainian advance. Units that weren't attacked fled anyway, because staying meant being isolated. Self-fulfilling collapse. Psychology became reality. Once collapse started, became unstoppable. Ukrainian advance was fast. Psychological collapse was faster. Ukrainian exploitation, critical factor. Ukrainians didn't stop after breakthrough, continued advancing, maintained momentum, exploited success immediately. This prevented Russian recovery, prevented defensive line stabilization, kept Russians off balance. This exploitation doctrine is NATO standard. It requires training, initiative, competence at all levels. Ukrainian forces had all three, executed perfectly. Russians couldn't handle this tempo, never recovered initiative. 3 questions from the beginning. Time to answer them. How did Ukraine achieve complete surprise? Perfect operational security. Deception operations suggesting offensive elsewhere. Russian intelligence failure. All combined. Ukrainians moved forces at night, maintained communications discipline, created false signatures in south. Russians believed deception, reinforced wrong sector, weakened Kharkiv. When offensive launched, Russians were surprised completely. Surprise enabled everything else. Why did Russian defenses collapse totally? Multiple failures, overextension, intelligence failure, command paralysis, troop quality issues, psychological collapse, all reinforce each other. No single failure caused collapse. System failure. Multiple weaknesses that seemed manageable individually became catastrophic when Ukrainian forces exploited all simultaneously. This is what happens when military system has multiple problems and faces competent enemy who exploits them perfectly. What does this reveal about Russian military capability? Everything. Can't defend everywhere. Can't gather good intelligence. Can't respond to fast-moving operation. Can't prevent psychological collapse. Can't execute modern mobile defense. All these failures manifested at Kharkiv. 3 days exposed Russian military's systemic weaknesses. These weaknesses persist, still vulnerable, still slow, still brittle psychologically. Kharkiv taught lesson Russian military hasn't learned, can learn maybe. Institutional problems are too deep. The lesson from Kharkiv is that operational surprise and exploitation tempo are decisive in modern warfare. Ukrainian forces achieved surprise, exploited with speed, maintained momentum. Russian forces were surprised, couldn't respond, collapsed. This pattern is universal. Fast operations against slow enemy create conditions for decisive victory. Kharkiv proved it. 50 kilometers in 3 days proved it. Russian collapse proved it. This is Iron Bullet. We analyze battles that define wars. Kharkiv offensive defined Ukrainian military as force capable of major offensive operations. Proved NATO training works. Proved Russian defenses are vulnerable. Proved that speed and surprise still defeat mass and position. 3 days changed strategic balance. Gave Ukraine initiative. Forced Russia into defensive posture. All because Ukrainian planning was excellent and Russian response was catastrophic. Offensive succeeded beyond anyone's expectations. Changed war's trajectory. All from 72 hours of brilliant execution. Subscribe to Iron Bullet. Because in modern warfare, surprise and speed are force multipliers that enable smaller forces to defeat larger ones. Ukrainian forces were outnumbered overall. Concentrated at decisive point, achieved local superiority, exploited breakthrough, maintained tempo Russians couldn't match. This is professional military operations. This is what NATO training produces. This is why Kharkiv worked, why Russian collapse was total, why 3 days liberated 3,000 square kilometers. Lesson is clear. Train well, plan carefully, execute fast. Results follow. 50 kilometers, 3 days, total Russian collapse. That's Kharkiv offensive. proof that operational art still matters, that surprise still works, that speed overwhelms a slower enemy, that psychological collapse creates military collapse, that training determines outcomes. Ukrainian forces trained well, planned carefully, executed brilliantly. Russian forces failed at every level. Gap between competence levels measured in kilometers liberated and prisoners captured. 3 days changed war. Started with surprise, ended with victory. Kharkiv is case study in operational excellence. Real battles, real tactics, real consequences. Stay informed.